Afternoon, and welcome up. Great St. David's Brother. Welcome to St. David's Day, sponsored by the Ministry of Community and Cultural Affairs. I first want to offer apologies for Minister Butterfield. She is scheduled to be here, but unfortunately she is running a little late today, and the busy life of a minister. I want to thank the Honorable Letha Butterfield, JPMP, the Member of Parliament representing St. David's. She is present, but she is also shopping right now in the arts and crafts area. Yes, Miss Honorable Levita Fergo. Before we get started, my name is Stephen Tucker. I'm going to be one of your co-hosts today, along with Mr. Stuart Hollis, also sitting in the front row. Again, I want to thank you all for coming out. We've got some nice shade for everybody, some food available that's going to be served to you later on today. So no need for the kids to run up and down to the sandwiches and cookies. They will come around to you. Also available is going to be open for Carter House, and one of my guests behind me will talk about it a bit further. But we're going to start off with the program right now. But first, I want to introduce you to Mr. Rick Sperling. He is the president of the St. David's Historical Society. Mr. Sperling.
Thank you, Stephen. I hope you appreciate my address today. I thought it was going to be very warm, but actually it's quite cool. As Stephen said, I'm president of the St. David's Island Historical Society, and I just want to give you a little history of how that came about. About 11 or 12 years ago, the base was abandoning Bermuda, and we were made aware by Joyce Hall, actually, that this building and its historical importance was about to be left, and we should do something about it. So we formed a small group, which we later incorporated, but at that time it was an association, and then we negotiated with the BLDC to acquire Carter House on a long lease basis, which we did. We also have a boundary that extends around Carter House. It's about where the cedar trees end here, and we undertook a major planting exercise, as you can see around here, planting mainly endemic and native species. And we still have a long way to go because it's hard to get some of those plants started. But we do have 4 yellowwood trees, which are fairly rare, and a number of olive wood as well, and of course cedars and palmettos. But there's also snowberry and a few others around here that are less common. We took over Carter House and totally restored it because it was left by the base. It wasn't in bad shape by any means. The exterior and the roof was in good shape, but we had to remove a lot of walls, replace electrics, and so on. And that was a major fundraising drive, and it cost us about $130,000 to restore that. Since then, we've done more restoration. When you go inside, and hopefully you all will, you'll see 2 fireplaces in there. When Carter House was built, it had 2 big fat chimneys like that on either side, and that far window down there on the northern side was not there. In the late 1700s, we think, they took down that chimney, added that room, and blocked up the other fireplace. A year or so ago, I unblocked that fireplace, took out the rooms that were there, and that's why we built that additional building up there so we could put everything else in it, and then opened that up and made bigger museum space, and also restored that lower floor to pretty much what it was originally, which is a great improvement, and you can go in and see that. Carter House is called Carter House because of Christopher Carter, who was on the Sea Venture, and of course stayed behind in Bermuda when the Deliverance and Patience went to Jamestown, and also stayed here after Sir George Somers came back to Bermuda, died here, and his nephew went back to England. He stayed here with 2 others, Waters and Chart. So Christopher Carter really is Bermuda's first Bermudian, our first official resident, permanent resident. And this house is named after Christopher Carter because we're pretty certain, although it's hard to have absolute proof, but we know that Martha Hayward lived in this house in the 1700s. She died at 1791 at 114, I think it was. And she used to make all these palmetto hats and products that she used to ship to England, and the palmetto hats became a rage in England in the 1700s. I think she sent one to Queen Anne. Anyway, Martha Hayward lived there with her husband, and she apparently is the great-granddaughter of Christopher Carter. Now, I have done as much research as I can, and I'll continue to do it, to determine that connection. I can trace back to Martha Hayward. I know Christopher Carter had 3 daughters, and he was killed in the 1620s out here in Castle Harbor when he was having a fun time on a ship here called the Seaflower, and someone ignited the gunpowder room, and the whole ship blew up, and Christopher Carter and his wife were killed. Anyway, he had 3 children, one of whom, I think it's Elizabeth, actually lived on Cooper's Island. And of course, Christopher Carter lived on that island as well. So we're not sure how to make the connection from Elizabeth to the Haywards. It's somewhere in there. A lot of the records are missing, and we're not able to put it together. But that's a work in progress, and we'll continue to try and find that out. Anyway, Carter House, definitely late 17th century. It says 1640 and that's the date that came with it. I'm not sure where it came from, but I'm pretty certain it's late 1600s, perhaps very early 1700s, but it could be as early as 1680. So, and it's a beautiful house. It's in good shape. You can see so many of the old Bermuda features on this wonderful house. You can see the gutters going around the chimney and so on. That's classic, and the 2 little tanks in the back. And of course the woodwork and beams inside and the fireplaces themselves, as well as the history of St. David's. That's just end by saying our goal as a museum is to exhibit St. David's culture, history, and people. And we do that largely through pictures and anecdotes and individuals, pictures of individuals and who they were and what they did. And you're going to hear a lot more about that today, about St. David's and its culture and its people and what they did. So I won't say any more. I'll get on with the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sperling. I'm going to do a couple more housekeeping notes before I introduce our next speaker. I did mention some of the food that's being served and sponsored by the Cultural Affairs, but we also have some delicious fish chowder that's going to be served, samples we serve underneath Carter House. One special note can definitely make me made. It is St. David's Day, and as I said already, we are very unique, different set of people. Today's presentation might seem a little bit organized in some way. There might seem a little bit of missteps. I can guarantee you it was planned that way. Okay. So, having said that, the next person up here will be Miss Nevis Felice. She's the interim chairman of the St. David's Islanders and Native Community.
Well, today's a great day for the St. David's Islanders and Native community because it's allowing us to fulfill our mission, which is to preserve and promote the unique heritage of St. David's Island, as well as the other history of Native cultures in Bermuda. Our organization is pleased to host a powwow every 2 years here in St. David's. I'm sure some of you have attended. As some of you may know, we made a reconnections with our cousins, our Native American cousins from the East Coast tribes in the U.S., and they come to the powwow every 2 years to help us celebrate. We're thankful to them for their teaching us the traditions of our ancestors, which we will be sharing with you later today through song and dance. Singing these native songs and dancing these dances makes me feel whole and at home. If any of you feel the same calling, we encourage you to join our organization because we're always looking for membership. And you don't have to be necessarily from St. David's to join. Any of you that feel the calling or have Native heritage, please come. The St. David Islanders and Native community is a registered charity and donations are always welcome. We also want to thank Burroughs Lightbourne and Bermuda Cablevision who donated prizes for our raffle today, so please purchase them. They are on sale over at that tent. We thank you for coming today, and please enjoy the rest of the program.
I want to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Mr. Dale Butler, JPMP, for arriving. Thank you very much, sir, for coming. Also want to point out to the arts and crafts stall over there, we have several different local St. David's artisans on display. We have Miss Ronnie Chameau having her banana leaf dolls, the St. David's Islanders and Native Community store selling T-shirts and some other memorabilia and some books. Neves Felice's company Crystals and Crafts selling various jewelry and earrings. My aunt Creative Designs. St. David's Beather. Sorry. That's one of the mishaps. Planned it that way. See? Trust me. Gonna take it all in stride. Creative Design, selling various crocheting and also some more jewelry. And so various artifacts historical artifacts on display come from the collection of Mr. James Smith. And lastly, Ms. Heather Brangman is also selling some of her Native American jewelry, fans, plaques. It's very nice display over there. So when we have our breaks, I want to encourage you to also take a look inside of Carter House, take a slow walk down there to the artisans area, and take part in the raffle draw. There's was some really nice prizes available to everybody. So during our breaks, we'll have a few draws every half an hour. That's our plan. And the raffles are going to be 6 for $5. You get 6 raffles for $5. Okay, so get on with the show. First group up is going to talk about piloting in Old St. David's. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Mr. Wendell Burchell Sr. and Mr. Wendell Burchell Jr. Some hand holding anything?
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? I'm the junior. All right. Well, Wendell, and I'm a current serving pilot. Been serving with the pilot service for roughly, well, I started as an apprentice in 95, had my license in '01, so I'm coming up on 10 years for my license. Spent a lot of time, of course, I'm a native St. David's Islander, and grew up a lot of time spending with my old man and my pa on the pilot boat, thus became my interest and wanted to be a pilot. Just to get a little history of the pilot service, and particularly when it comes to St. David's. Pilot service, well, piloting pretty much anywhere in the world started where, you know, a ship pulls up somewhere and not sure how to get in. We're talking sailing ships way back when. And local fishermen go out there, hey, boy, what's happening? Where you want to go? I know how to take you there. All right, so I'll take you there. And generally, they would pay them for their services. But then there were times where they wouldn't be paid for their services, like just get off my ship. If not, I'll throw you overboard. You know, thanks for getting me where I wanted to go. Now, the value of pilots was recognized by the Crown, you know, as a colony back in early 1800s to, I think it was 1812, during the War of 1812, that they enacted a law where any ship pulling into Bermuda had to take a pilot and pay them. This was good for the people who were acting as pilots at the time, even though they didn't have licenses, but it created a lot of competition. So you had people who all of a sudden, because I know the waters, became pilots. Now, what they used to do is they had gangs, you'd had gigs. Unfortunately, we have a gig here, but a gig is a rowboat, which is very narrow, very long, usually about maybe 20 to 30 feet long, rowed by either 4 or 8 people, depending on how far out they want to go. Later on, they pop sails on them, so they'd be able to move a little bit faster. But along here, before the creation of the base, you used to have a lot of mangroves, and you used to have like natural boat houses, and they'd have them shoved up in there, or some further to the eastern side created slips, and they just pull them up. Now, what they would do is they would hang around, they'd have a little boy or something, somebody's son, send him up to a top hill somewhere and have him watch the horizon. When they saw a sail, he'd run down, all right, there's a sail out there. And they'd go out there and they'd row and row, sometimes out 10, 15, 20 miles. Go to the ship, pilot get on board, and they'd bring them in. Now, the competition was that whoever got there first and got their pilot on board got paid. So you, unfortunately, if you got there second, you rowed 20 miles for absolutely nothing and had to row back. Later on, because of this competition and the fighting and sometimes that used to occur, the Crown enacted laws that actually started governing the pilot service. You know, they took control, they had regulations, and set the tariff, because unfortunately, while it was written where you had to pay the pilot, there was no tariff as to how much you had to pay. So some guy would get on board and say, yeah, I'll accept £1, and the other guy's like, no, £2 or else your ship's not moving. You know, now generally ships always came from the east, especially if you're coming from Europe or United States and Canada. But there were also pilots at the western end, say for ships that came from the Carolinas and Florida, you know, through the western passages. Most ships those days who came to Bermuda, they'd be brought through the cut at Castle Roads into here, which is now Castle Harbor. At that time, it was called Town Harbor because it was attached to the town of St. George, later Southampton, and then Castle Harbor. But the pilots would bring them in here, they'll drop anchor. If they were shallow enough, they would take them through into St. George's Harbor, through where Marginal Wharf is, Ship's Wharf, whatever it's called now. They cut through there before that was all filled in, and they would go into St. George.